What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you a brand new unit analysis video sponsored by Twitch chat. Say hello to my fellow YouTubers, YouTube watchers of course, and YouTube, feel free to leave your hellos in the comments below to the Twitch folks. Of course you could just come out to the Twitch streams and say hi that way, that also works, and you join the discussion and possibly even sponsor one of these videos yourself. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the chem analysis video, and today's, as you can see by the title, hopefully on the video, or maybe that's below me, I'm not sure where it is. Today's video will focus on Duo Ephraim, and I feel like this is actually a good follow-up to the importance of duo heroes and how you can truly implement one of the most common duo heroes I feel most people would have due to a spark, due to a hero fest, and just in general, with like new players should have them too from their hero fest too. So I feel like this is one of the more common duo heroes, and maybe you have them. So I'm going to show you guys how you can put them to good use, or at least I feel his best places are. He's one of the, surprisingly, I think he's actually one of the better duo heroes, even though he was the first. Or maybe that was Hector. I don't remember who it was. They're both, Ephraim is pretty solid, okay? And so sit back and enjoy what this will show you. Alright, so first up, I want to actually bring to you where I consider the ideal places to use Duo Ephraim is going to be. As a follow-up to the Duo Heroes video, which covered all the other Duo Heroes, Ephraim didn't actually score as one of the better ones that you could get, but if you do only have him, then I think this is a good start. So right now, I don't really recommend IP teams, but if you were to use him, he'd probably be best suited to be on an IP team or potentially a mixed team comp. My biggest issue with him being on a mixed team comp though is he doesn't really have much of a place. On a IP team, he's fairly bulky in most stats, so I feel like if you're gonna put him somewhere and on a pretty low merge kind of way, he actually scales really well with merges. He wants all stats. Then frontline on IP with the sample map on the left there is a good way to do it. IP team's biggest weaknesses are low threat, so you kind of allow your enemies to set up, and getting hit by a bull tower, and then kind of getting hit and run or cleaned up like PvE style. So to counter that, I'd say that Duma and Catapult are a must. So if you have Duo Ephraim, he ideally wants to be combined with Duma. Okay, Duma to hit any potential bull towers, Catapult to hit bull towers, commonly used on lane 3 and 4. That'll allow Ephraim, in this case, on this particular setup, to be fairly resilient against most common threats. And of course, we'll cover that in a moment. But essentially, how I feel you should use him is his front line. The reason I wouldn't recommend him on backline, even though his weapon is pretty good, has good follow-ups, like he will likely win his attack checks and kill a lot of things. The problem is he doesn't really have movement or as much threat as any other potential, honestly, Blue Lance Cavs. Like you could have Petrine as an example, Death Knight, Roderick, all backline rally traps, or even Danced, where they'll have far more reach than Ephraim would have in a backline, so I wouldn't recommend him there. And the same issue kind of exists on a mixed team comp. He's not really frontlining because mixed team comps provide high threat through like healers or bow calves or something on the front line, where like his frontlining doesn't really matter in that case, and his backline again doesn't have reach. So I don't recommend him as a sort of backline unit. You could probably make it work maybe with Wings of Mercy or something like that, but I don't know. I don't really feel like you want to use him there. So frontlining, that's where I think the ideal place to be is. And I like Anima because he does well against all the mythics on Astra Season. Against him right now, there's no real good mythic that plays into him and wins decisively. So Anima, good place to be. I'm sure he could work on Dark too, but Duma is his best friend, so why not combine him with that? The thing with dual heroes is they enable the dual hindrance building, and yes, you could definitely like potentially snipe the dual hindrance building, or even there are plenty of units who could actually snipe Ephraim on frontline as well and activate that dual building. However, he is pretty resilient, we'll go into that, and the dual hindrance building isn't that easy of a snipe. It can be done, but it's not that easy. So with that being said, you definitely can consider him here. And of course, a lot of this is kind of just a sample. You can definitely mix match positions, and ideally just Ephraim is frontline. That's how I would roll it. So what I want to cover here is actually the good partner being Merrick, and also how he sims against common matchups that you could probably expect to play into your team, which in this case would be something like these guys, okay? So as a low investment, he actually does really well at, he doesn't die to Regan, which is good. That's very important that you're not a blue unit dying to Regan, so of course I had to check that. With Deflect Missile, he's not gonna die to Brave Bow or any dual Lins that run into you. That's important. I really wouldn't sub out Deflect Missile in this case. You'd have to have him really high investment and maybe running stuff like Distant Defense or maybe Attack Defense solo to really try to survive those scenarios. But I don't think that's worth it, and I think it's just better to run Deflect Missile and not worry about physical threats who attack into him with a double in stuff like Lin and Brave Bow threats like Leaf or any other Brave Bow threats. You just don't want to get hit by that stuff, so Deflect Missile works. A lot of magic damage gives him a lot of trouble though, like Legendary Lilina, Reinhardt obviously, Ophelia, or any other pre-charged specials. Now, good counterplay to actually pre-charge specials can be in the form of Odd Pulse Tie, which would hit Regan on turn 1, but would hit whatever AoE special nuke that a player might be using, such as Ophelia or Lilina. So definitely a solid option to combine with him, and you could potentially shut down a lot of kind of like hit and run playstyles or nukers that people might use. I don't see this being too common, but it's definitely something you should consider. And if people are going to be using a red tank, then they're not going to have good matchups against Duo Ephraim. He actually wins against most stuff. I didn't even sim stuff like Hollow Knight or let's say Shannon or Marita, because I feel like he would definitely survive and pressure them really hard, especially something like Post Dance. Now, Christmas Ultina is someone that he is going to win against usually, but definitely the more invested, hyper invested, or well supported Christmas Ultinas can Twin Blades kill him. So that is something to consider, but at the end of the day, him being able to frontline a lot of other threats, and potentially, the thing is, at higher investment, like I'm saying you go like plus res and high merge, you actually start living more common threats. If you throw like Distant Guard potentially on the allies near him, he starts living against stuff like Lina. He can actually live against Reinhardt at high merges, and that's like a Death Blow 4 type of Reinhardt, so that ends up being fairly impressive. With high merges, he actually ends up scaling well because he uses all the stats, and Christmas Ultina at that point would have basically no chance. Even the well supported ones would struggle to beat him because of just his high, really high bulk. So with that being said though, he's okay, and if you have him, you should use him. He has a place. He's not the worst. I definitely would say that if you're running basically if you're running like Halloween Hector on defense, or maybe Duo Marth, you're gonna have a much harder time, or even like Duo Athun. Those are much harder units to incorporate on defense than Ephraim, and I feel like Ephraim's weapon does him a lot of favors and creates a consistent threat for him to be able to play into people, like to play against those people and win in a lot of matchups. So Duo Ephraim, okay. Pretty good on defense, more than I would have expected on first impression. So I'm glad I did the analysis to check the sims. He scores pretty well for me. I put him in the right place, I think, in my dual building. I'm gonna stand by that, but they shouldn't only consider him being there. But one thing I want to recommend for sure is a good partner in the form of Merrick, okay? So because he's blue, and because you might want to run something like a red nuke, or maybe a colorless nuke like Kagro, or maybe Leon, then Merrick actually ends up being very good complement to him, in the form of literally just wind sweeping stuff like Brave Edelgard or Brave Hector, who might show up against your team. And his AoE with pretty high investment, like Life and Death 4 here, with high investment, he actually ends up being a solid, pretty, not budget, but at least you should have a lot of copies to consider investing into him as being a solid nuke against those threats. So they complement each other pretty well. I think if you had Duo Ephraim and maybe you had Merrick on your team, or maybe like Sonya as well, could definitely work here. Those are all things you can consider, and Dark Excalibur really lends itself well to an IP team. So that's a good option. Of course, he's not only used on defense, so I will definitely cover other places where you should think about using him. And I think a pretty easy, kind of like he's kind of good to go, would be literally just throwing him as a Wings of Mercy unit. You give him Slaying Lance, and hopefully you have like Times Pulse, but if you don't, you could actually just get him with an Infantry Pulse, like let's say by bonus Asker. Then he could pretty easily slot into some Wings of Mercy Gale Force strategies. He comes with Heavy Blade 4, which is like perfect for this, and you give him Quick Impulse, maybe one extra pulse through an Infantry Pulse if you don't have Times Pulse, and he can slot in pretty well there for offense. So if you want to use him, that would be a way to do it. His dual scale ends up being pretty good there to give you reach if you need to use it. But I'm not really going to talk more into this. This could easily fit into a lot of Gale Force teams, so if you wanted to use him for that, go ahead. The last thing I'm going to touch on is, of course, because he's a duo unit, he has higher scoring, and because of that higher scoring, you should potentially use him on Arena should you bring him all the way up to +10. So if you bring him all the way to +10, I think his ideal seasons are either Fire or Earth, not Water. I don't think he's gonna match up that well against Chrom and Dimitri. Probably don't want to go there. I really don't think you should go there. But like Fire, I think he does pretty well, except maybe the Celica matchup, which you should basically try to get him to one-shot Celica and make sure he survives a single hit. So drive attack support, a lot of drive attack support, maybe attack defense solo, maybe attack defense bond, maybe attack res bond, maybe when we get attack res solo. Those are all things to consider. Essentially, you just want him to consider that Celica matchup. How does he beat that, and is he supported to do that? He should actually beat stuff like Edelgard because of his effective damage and auto double, which then trumps her like denying the auto double effects. He has more speed, so he ends up winning that, and all the other stuff too. He should do well against Lilina. He has enough bulk to survive that, and he should, you know, if you support him, I think you can definitely take these matchups, and all the other stuff on Fire lends itself well. Plus, he complements the legendaries in that season well, except himself, I guess. But who's using Legendary Ephraim in 2021? Let's be real, right? So yeah, he complements now Lilina, Edelgard, and Celica well as partners because he's blue and doesn't conflict with those colors to create really weird compositions. So yeah, that basically covers Duo Ephraim, folks. I would say I started off pretty skeptical of how good he might be, especially on defense, because that's where you would want to use him, but he actually works pretty well, and with investment, merges, maybe up to +10, you can use him both in Arena and in AR defense, and even AR offense. Yeah, pretty good. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this analysis. Feel free to let me know your opinion on this duo hero and maybe future duo heroes. If you really like this type of content, feel free to jump into Twitch chat on the Twitch stream, which of course links are below, and join the discussions or potentially recommend certain units you may want to see covered. I don't usually go into 5-star exclusives and premiums, but I think this was a pleasant surprise and many people might have this. So thank you guys, and give the video a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Much love. Peace.